All right, your reporting continues now here on the Newsfeed PM. Firefighters continue to battle a veld fire in Simonstown, just outside of Cape Town. Residents of Simonskloof and Harbour Heights were evacuated in the early hours of this morning as the blaze urged ever so closer to their homes. At least 5 firefighters have sustained injuries, with 2 admitted to hospital. No other injuries or fatalities have been reported thus far. For the latest on this story, let's chat now to Trevor Abrahams, the CEO of Working on Fire, who joins us now live. Trevor, good to have you, and thank you very much for coming on.
Good afternoon. Thank you.
What makes for lack of a better word, a perfect storm in a fire situation of this nature?
So, you know, in South Africa we have two fire seasons. So this is typical fire season in the Western Cape in summer. So the ingredients there is heat, wind and fuel, right? And we've just come out of a La Nina period, which has been wetter and cooler than normal. So we've had tremendous new growth. All of that there contributing to the fuel load. And now you have the switch to El Nino, where we're anticipating dry, if not drought conditions, in the summer and the next summer certainly. We have the wind ripping there at the moment, and all this new foliage is coming dry. So you need the spark, which can be from various resources, but once it goes, it really goes.
And when you land in that kind of situation, I mean, what are the variables that you're dealing with in ensuring that, one, you can either contain that fire in the shortest time possible, or, as we are seeing now, some continuation of it?
Well, typically in a large conflagration like this, you have an incident command set up. And your incident command, in this case, there's a dual, both Sandparks and the city metro of Cape Town are heading it. And they make their calls in terms of where the priorities, the kind of resources that's needed. And typically you prioritize human life and assets as the first, okay? So we've had 6 helicopters on the fire yesterday, another 4 busy working on it as we speak. And you throw everything at it to try and stop it in its tracks, particularly when it starts threatening your human life, your infrastructure, your housing. Yeah. And fortunately, the fire was going extremely fast yesterday. It even threatened the Navy dump, a sort of arms dump there. And then fortunately the wind died, as it does typically in the evening. So it gave us a respite. So about an hour ago, we were saying actually we're comfortable with containing where it is. And all of a sudden we've had flare-ups. And right now, the housing in the Froggy Farm area close to the Boulders Beach area that most people know from tourists is actually under threat. So it can change very dramatically. The big variable is the weather.
Yeah. So what I do hear, I mean, some conversations that happen, at least amongst firefighters, is that the fire begins to have some kind of life of its own. You refer to it as some kind of a living being.
Yes, I mean, so as I said, the variables is the vegetation, the fuel, and the wind. Oxygen is always there to burn, you know. So once you get the hot enough and once you get going, it can run. So we are fearing at the moment that some of the part of this fire is bordering an area that hasn't been for 40 years. So your fynbos typically requires burning for about every 10, 15 years to propagate itself.
Yes.
So when you have an area that hasn't been for that duration, you have all this moribund material lying there. And if it gets in there, it could become quite catastrophic.
Yeah. And I suppose that's where you come in, working on fire.
Well, we have at the moment, we have about 60-odd firefighters personnel on there. We have our choppers are busy on the fire. The city of Cape Town has some 63 people. They've got 6 fire engines, tankers on the fire. We've got volunteer firefighters, the NCC also, and the Table Mountain resources there. So it's a really combined effort. And we had a fire launch, or the launch of the fire season about 2 weeks ago, where we said, this is looking as if it's going to become the worst. What the news doesn't often record, we've had the worst fire season in 8 years in South Africa now. We've burnt 1.9 million hectares.
Wow.
Right? Northwest has burnt 1.2 million hectares alone. Agri-SA is reporting 400,000 hectares of grazing land lost, R1 billion worth of cattle. Yeah. So Unfortunately, this has been a bit under the radar, but we've been burning like hell.
Well, why is that? Is it because people are using less of your services? Because from what I know, you are supposed to be there to help them to prevent such things from happening by burning throughout the year and making sure that you control their spaces.
You're absolutely correct. I mean, the kind of preventative work in the off-season is often shaped what you get up in the fire season itself. It's just this year has been absolutely catastrophic globally. I mean, Canada burnt 18.5 million hectares offshore. It's the worst ever in Canada's recorded history. We had the Hawaii fires, we had the European fires, Algeria lost 24. We even lost, remember the 6 at Loatsa, the base. So it's been a global year of fires. And this is your climate change. This is indisputably linked to the kind of increase in temperature. And this year has been a record high in terms of any recorded temperature. On the, I think it's 4th of July, 6th of July, and then again on the 7th of July was the highest temperatures recorded. Yeah, indeed. Globally on average.
And what do you advise, I mean, people with vast amounts of land in a situation of this nature with the events becoming so frequent now because of climate change?
Look, you know, the UN has pushed out a report called Spreading Like Wildfire, and one of the prescripts, it says, more must be spent on preventative and preparedness. And I think that's the simple logic. If you want to try and prevent the catastrophe, you try and do something beforehand, before it happens. And, you know, with all the kind of moisture that we've had over the last 3 years, the growth has been phenomenal. I drove past Simonskloof Bay about a month ago, and I saw the trees literally growing onto the road, which is a tourist road, where you normally look down. I've never seen it like that. I grew up there. I used to dive along that coast. I've never seen growth of that order. So I think, you know, after the wet seasons that we've had, we also need to realize what, in fact, is leaving in its wake. I took someone to try and recce the Table Mountain UCT fire just to see the burn scar. I couldn't see any scar. It was all green. So, you know, as much as we appreciate the rain, it brings the incipient threat of, if we don't do enough about the extra foliage, the extra growth that's happening, we are then faced with the catastrophe when it comes.
Yeah, yes, indeed. And of course, this is once again a reminder, or even brings about a question of whether South Africa, we are equipped enough and we have manpower enough and expertise enough to respond to these kinds of situations.
So Working on Fire is the largest wildland fire organization in the world. We've got 5,300 young people who we employ from the rural areas predominantly. And that's why we go to Canada and help out when they are in need. But we've estimated that we need some 17,000 to properly cover this country.
Sure.
And that's a huge expense. And, you know, government, its own purses are quite tight. We really do need to get to our private sector to contribute to this, because it's a multiply good project. It's employing youth. It trains them. They do good for our society. But I think if we're going to wait for the fires and then look for what we need, we're going to be behind the curve.
Yeah, indeed. Trevor, appreciate your time.
Sure.
Thank you very much for having come in. That is Trevor Abrahams there. He is with Working on Fire.